we will scrap Mr. Trudeau's carbon tax.
That promise and the Conservative Party's long-awaited climate plan was unveiled, replacing the Liberals' carbon price with a pricing mechanism of their own.
We recognize that the most efficient way to reduce our emissions is to use pricing mechanisms.
A plan the party's leader insists is not a tax, but a carbon levy on fuel purchases.
This is not a tax at all. Every time Canadians buy hydrocarbon-based fuel, they will pay into their low-carbon savings account that they will manage and use towards purchases that will help them lower their carbon footprint.
So is this plan enough to convince voters? How do other Conservatives feel about it? It's Thursday, and thankfully I'm here with At Issue, Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, and Althea Raj. All right, I'm not going to say very much this week because I know you all have tons to say about this. Chantal, let's start with the best way to describe this. Mr. O'Toole doesn't want to call it a tax. How would you describe it? What is it that we're dealing with here?
I would first say this is the most ambitious climate change plan that the Conservative Party has put forward. The bar was low. By any other name, this will come across as a shift to carbon pricing in the shape of a carbon tax. That is how the Conservatives molded the public discourse when anything that involved carbon pricing that individuals might pay was described as a carbon tax. So it's fair game to say this is a carbon tax in the same way that the carbon tax that Justin Trudeau has put in place and is rebating is a carbon tax in Conservative speak. The only difference is, in this case, it would go to some savings account that you would be told how to spend the money that you accumulate over it. But bottom line, it parallels with lower targets and lower prices the Liberal system. And I'm guessing most people will see that as a carbon tax in the same way that they see the tax on pollution or the price on pollution that of the Liberals as a carbon tax.
How significant a move is this, do you think, Andrew, that Mr. O'Toole has proposed this?
Yeah, we shouldn't underestimate how difficult this is for a Conservative leader for all the reasons that Chantal has just been saying. They've spent several years demonizing anything to do with carbon pricing, carbon tax. And so for a Tory leader to stand up and announce anything resembling a carbon price or a carbon tax is a major shift and not an easy one given all the opposition he'll face within his own party. That being said, they've managed to come up with the only kind of carbon tax that's unlikely to actually reduce carbon emissions very much. There's a critical difference between this and the Liberal one. The Liberal one is they give you a fixed rebate, and the more that you pay in tax, the less you get to keep in the rebate. The less you pay in tax, the more you get to keep in the rebate. In the Tory, so there's always an incentive, in other words, to reduce your carbon consumption. In the Tory version, the more that you pay in the tax, the more you get to keep, the more that that builds up in your savings account. And so you wind up basically being no better off for having reduced your carbon consumption at all. You're basically, if you pay in $100, you get back $100. If you pay in $200, you get back $200. So that's a bit of a mess, and I think they need to rethink that. So you can either look at this as being a good day in that they're actually now plunged into on side with carbon pricing, but a bad day in that they haven't really designed it very well.
Althea, your thoughts on the significance of it coming from Mr. O'Toole and from this party?
Well, just on Andrew's last point,
yeah.
It actually could incentivize more behavior than the Liberals' plan, which basically gives you free money, which you can use to go to Mexico. Maybe not during COVID, but you know what I mean. I mean, you can use the money the way you want. And in this case, Big Brother is telling you how you should spend your money and on what you possibly should be spending your money, which probably is not very conservative. I mean, at the end of the day, yes, the Conservatives should absolutely get credit for presenting a credible plan, a plan that was introduced to us with the backing of a third party who had measured and basically said to us, these are comparable targets to the Liberals' 2030 targets, the Paris targets. Now, the Liberals are saying, well, next week we're going to announce further targets because we're going to join President Biden virtually, and we're going to announce a deepening of those targets because we know that actually to kind of save the planet, we need to go a lot further. But this is a deep betrayal to Conservative Party members, to caucus members. I mean, my understanding is full caucus was not even briefed on what was in this plan until reporters had been briefed, and then the details went out to all of the MPs in caucus. From the MPs I've spoken to, their phone lines have been flooded. There are angry Conservatives, especially angry Western Conservatives, who are talking about crossing the floor and joining Jay Hill's party, the Maverick Party, the Western Alienation Party, if you wish, who wants to model itself on the Bloc Québécois. There is deep frustration. But I think to Erin O'Toole's credibility, too, I mean, he's been criticized for flip-flopping on a variety of issues. And you can say that it's a levy and it's not a tax, but at the end of the day, it is verbal gymnastics. Everybody knows this is a tax.
Yeah, I also heard that a lot of MPs read about this first in our story last night, which is not the best way to keep a caucus happy, as we know. Chantal, can he get a handle on that? And is the risk of upsetting his caucus worth the potential payoff in the electorate?
Not clear, but the way this is handled, it does not sound like Mr. O'Toole's back is safe from his own caucus. Yeah. There is a possibility, so let me say two things that will sound contrary. There is a strong possibility that what happened today will not play well with Conservatives and will cost votes and will steer divisions within caucus, and at the same time not do well for the Conservatives electorally. So both, it's going to possibly turn out to be a lose-lose proposition. At the same time, it is possible in hindsight, when people look back on Erin O'Toole, who will not have won on this, that they will be thankful to him for having broken the ice and brought the Conservatives closer to the national consensus on carbon pricing. Yeah. So it's one and the other. Yeah, but for Erin O'Toole himself, I'm not so sure that there's a big reward waiting tomorrow for having done this.
Well, I compared this, I mean, the circumstances are different, obviously, Andrew, but it took a while for the Liberal Party, too, from Stéphane Dion's green shift to where we are now. It took a number of, and obviously it wasn't just that, but it took a number of failures to get to a place where they could sell something to the Canadians. Is it possible that that's what's going to happen with the Conservatives, too? It's not going to be overnight. It is going to take time.
Yes, I mean, it's partly for the reason you're saying. It's difficult to get the balance right on this policy. It's difficult to thread the needle in a way where you are achieving your emissions reductions without imposing needless hardships on people, for example. It's also difficult to get into the middle ground of politics. I think that's obviously what Erin O'Toole is trying to do, is to come in between the Liberals and the formerly hardline opposition to the carbon tax. But the middle ground can be treacherous ground in politics if you don't do it right. You just wind up getting shot at from both sides. And that's the danger is the hardliners are going to be just as upset as ever, and he's not going to gain credibility with people who want to see a credible conservative carbon policy plan. So that's the danger. Yeah.
And is the danger too, Althea, that as the Liberals now move to increase their carbon tax, which they have said they're going to do, that it becomes harder for the Conservatives to criticize that move now that they are themselves accepting a carbon price, although at a lower rate, a rate that stays at $50 a ton?
I don't know if it gets harder for them to criticize the Liberals, because we don't know how they're going to achieve those targets that they have yet to announce to us. But I think what it does is it makes it very clear that people for whom the environment is really at the top of mind, I don't think they were voting Conservatives anyways, but they still will not be voting Conservative. They will vote for the Green Party or the Liberal Party or the New Democrat Party. But for people for whom they care about the environment, but maybe they are pleased with recycling and reusing, and they maybe we'll do a meatless day of the week. I don't know, you know what I mean? But for whom this isn't a critical issue, they will feel like at least the Conservative plan gets us to the Paris targets. Maybe they don't get us to the next phase, but the party is still serious. This is a serious plan. I mean, in some ways, on the clean fuel standards, it actually goes further than what the Liberals are proposing. On the renewable natural gas, it goes further than what the Liberals are proposing. It's a costly plan. Yeah. But I think the Conservatives have decided and they will try to pitch it to people like farmers, like people who live in suburban areas, that actually they're better off under this plan. And that is where the discussion is going to go. I think they're very pleased to talk about the savings account, and we're going to hear a lot more about that.
Yeah, even if we don't understand how it works. Yes, Chantal, and then quickly Andrew. Yep.
It's not that.
I don't know. Where does it end up? Anyway, go ahead.
No,
Chantal,
I'm not sure that an air mile system that actually rewards you for using fossil fuels makes any sense, and it's easy enough to characterize as going the other way. It's very counterintuitive. But two, the notion that the state will tell you what you should be spending, whatever goes into the savings account, that they will know is in that savings account, I don't know how, and that they will know how you will spend. It's kind of weirdish. Is the federal government supposed to put, like air miles, a list of things that you could get for so many points?
Yeah, but think about home retrofits or the arts credit or the
yes. So
credit. Like,
I'm going to go. So I'm going to go and fuel up more and drive more, so I can get more points. That is what the point system is about.
Yes.
Yeah.
To drive up. You know, if you're an Aeroplan member, I am. You take more flights, you get more points. So in this case, you use up more fossil fuels, you get more points. There is something fundamentally absurd about this.
Okay, very quickly, Andrew. I don't know how quickly you can answer this. Does this do what they want it to do, which is in part to broaden the tent? Does it get anywhere to doing that, attracting new people to their party?
I don't think it's going to. I think it's, I mean, you can already see the Liberals polishing their attack lines on this. The more you burn, the more you earn. I think they need to rethink this. There's a simple fix, which is if you're going to set up these savings accounts, set everybody up with a fixed amount already credited to their account. And then the more that they charge in carbon tax, the more the carbon consumption they engage in, the more that account gets drawn down. So it basically works like the Liberal plan, only in reverse.
Okay.
So there's a way to fix this, but I think as it's scheduled, as it's designed right now, if something looks too good to be true, it is.
I think Canadians should expect our government to do something very significant in this area, because it's critical for the rebuilding of the economy as well as the social fabric of the country. And it frankly allows parents to participate in the workforce in a way that's not only good for the economy, but it's also good for families.
As Dominic LeBlanc, the Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, talking to me this past Sunday about what Canadians should expect when it comes to childcare in the budget on Monday. Chantal, Andrew, and Althea all back for another round of this. Before we get to childcare, let's just, I wouldn't mind your thoughts on the importance of this budget. The first for this finance minister, the first in 2 years, at a critical time for the country. It seems like that there's a lot riding on it, and I don't know if the government will be able to deliver on all the things that it's said it needs to do. Deal with the crisis now and set up some growth in the future. Chantal.
I'll be the contrarian. I think this budget is more important as a political document than as a budgetary milestone. Mm-hmm. And why I say that is, one, at stake is the survival of a minority government, because one opposition party has to support it. I believe that's going to happen. But second, we will likely go to the polls at some point before any of the measures in that budget and any parts of that plan is seriously implemented. So it's either not going to be worth anything because the Liberals will be out, or we'll see what they say if they are re-elected.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Andrew?
I think it was Adam Smith said there's an awful lot of ruin in a nation. You know, one budget is not going to make or break the economy or the country. Sure. But it can be a great missed opportunity. It looks to me like the Liberals are going to spend as much as they feel like spending, and they're not going to be deterred by those who are worried about where this is setting us up for the longer run. And that's a gamble that they feel is worth taking. But for those of us who are concerned about the longer run fiscal health of the country, it's going to be yet another missed opportunity to start to try to deal with that. It's not just a matter of balancing the budget in any 1 year, or whether you do it in 5 years or 6 years or 10 years. It's a matter in particular of, do we get started on trying to put the country on a higher growth track?
Yes.
And I'm not anticipating, because ultimately that's what we need. You know, if we're going to control the debt to GDP, You can control the numerator, but you also can kind of expand the denominator in that. And I don't anticipate we're going to see serious plans here for putting the economy on a higher growth track. There will be things that Liberals think will do that, but I don't think it's going to be the kinds of things that are actually required.
Althea, your thoughts?
Well, as we record this, my understanding is it hasn't been sent to the printers and they're still discussing, and that it's like 700 pages. So there's going to be a lot in this budget. I think I agree with Andrew, but I think what we're going to see is basically the Liberals' visions for the country is as if they had unlimited spending. Here it is. Everything that was in the throne speech that the finance minister told us in her fiscal update was going to be in this budget, should be in this budget. I think we're going to talk about childcare. Childcare is obviously going to be a big ticket item. I'm told not to expect, details on the pharmacare plan, but lots of money for Canadians that the Liberals want to signal to. So young people, women, Indigenous Canadians, racialized Canadians, small business owners. Basically, it sounds like there's going to be money for everybody. And to Chantal's point, yes, it's being designed as an election budget. It's also being designed as Chrystia Freeland's, the biggest thing she will have accomplished possibly until we maybe have a leadership race several years down the line. I don't want to say that too loudly, but it's no doubt weighing in her mind. I mean, the consultations that she has done on this budget suggest so. I don't actually think we're going to have an election on this budget. I think there's so much in here for the NDP to support that I don't see why we would go. I think the Liberals will engineer their own defeat, but it is certainly an election document.
Chantal wants to bite on. Oh, yeah, okay. Chantal and then Andrew quickly, yeah.
Well, unless you believe you can create a national childcare program between now and the end of December, it doesn't really matter that the government survives the presentation of this budget. Most of the important policies in there will not be implemented before we have an election.
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah. Andrew, sorry. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah. So having said that one budget doesn't make or break, what I do worry about in the longer run is not just the debt figures that are coming out of this, but we are essentially creating a culture of dependency in our business class. We have every industry in the country now basically getting its hooks into the federal government. And it is going to be extremely difficult to pry them off. And you can see them lining up in advance of this budget with their hands out. And we are inculcating a culture there, as I say, that will be very difficult to reverse amongst the business class in this country who have had their hooks into government for far too long anyway, but at a much grander scale now. And I think that's very worrisome.
That's interesting. Okay, one round on childcare. The Liberals have talked about childcare for, I don't know, decades, right? And certainly it's been contemplated in this country for an awfully long time too. Is this the moment where it happens? And why is this the different moment that would allow it to happen, Chantal? Is it simply the pandemic and what has happened to women? What is it?
It does sound that there is more momentum behind the idea. For sure, the Liberals will get buy-in from, for example, BC. Or John Horgan's government is very much into that. Probably from Ontario, because it's hard to say, I don't want to do this. But is this the big moment? I don't know. My younger son was 3 years old the first time a national child care program was promised. He has 3 children who will soon not need child care. So don't ask me if I believe that this is it.
That's a very good example, Chantal, of what I'm talking about. Andrew, do you think this is the moment where it happens? And is it needed? Is it the answer?
Well, yeah. So if it's the way it's envisaged by the Liberals, I'm not sure I want it to be the moment. It's far too easy, and it's been far too easy in a lot of arguments just to say, well, because of the pandemic, and that sort of is supposed to answer every question. Sure. There is a long-running case to be made for making daycare, childcare more affordable for parents. That's true. That has not changed because of the pandemic, and it hasn't changed, in my opinion, that it's a better and preferable way to do that is to put the money directly into parents' hands rather than transfer it to the provinces and then tell the provinces they have to transfer it to daycare operators. I think you get a much more bang for the buck. You get something that respects parental choices much better. And I prefer that we pursued that approach, which, among other things, also gets you into much less fights with the provinces, which is where I think this is headed.
Yeah, although Quebec doesn't do it that way. Quebec does subsidize daycares, provides daycare at a low. Yes, go ahead, Chantal.
And it also begs the question, what parental choices?
Yeah. Yes, I suppose. Well,
Sorry.
I mean, if you don't want to send your child to daycare, if you want to stay home and look after your child, I guess
but
that's
if you do want childcare at $4,000 a month, that is what we're talking about outside Quebec at this point.
Yes. Yeah, and I would just say, I'll let Althea wrap this up, but the Quebec model has shown time and again that it does bring, A, more women into the workforce, and B, provides growth to the economy. So I take Andrew's point, but there is a model that shows that it can work. Anyway, Althea.
And that is exactly what the federal Liberals want to do. They want a Quebec model across the country. They want to bring more women back into the workforce, the women who have left the workforce because of COVID, and they want to spur economic growth. And they believe that this is the way to achieve it. I think the devil will be in the details, and I don't expect any of those details to be in the federal budget, frankly. The other issue is this government has not been very good about tying the premier's hands when it comes to doing anything. So how can you guarantee that the premiers are going to spend the money that you lay out for them?
Well, let me just go back.
Well, you could, but I don't know that you're going to do it.
So let me just let Andrew have the last word there. Then, are you suggesting that it will just be too hard to do with the provinces?
I think, well, it depending on how closely you try to tie the strings.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult to do that. Basically the money doesn't have little labels attached to it. So the provinces are free to spend the money any way they like. This is the same case with healthcare, et cetera. So, what there can be is political pressure, do it this way because the public wants it. We have polling data that shows that they want to do it this way. But provinces that don't want to do it, there's going to be hard to force them into line.
Okay, I got to leave it there. You'll all be back on Monday. Lucky me. Okay, I'll see you then. Thank you all.